If you've ever wondered about the effectiveness of mammography, or if you're thinking about having one, this is the place to be. Today, we look at both sides of the issue. What you hear may surprise you. I'm Mary McDougall, and you're watching McDougall, MD.
Well, Mary,
Yes?
have you ever had a mammogram?
Yes.
Do you think that's the best way to prevent you getting breast cancer?
Well, that's why we're here today, to try and find out. And right now, we'd like to welcome Dr. Judy Ann Chapman. She's a biostatistician who continually tries to make sense out of the raw data produced by surveys and clinical studies. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And do you think, Dr. Chapman, that it's the best way to prevent from dying from breast cancer?
It's the best we've got right now, yes.
Why is there so much controversy? You know, I'm an internist, and the American College of Physicians says that women under 50 should not get mammograms. And many other organizations. In fact, it's kind of divided. Half of the major groups say, yes, you should get a mammogram under 50. Half should say you shouldn't. Why the controversy?
There are two conflicting pieces of information. One is based on the gold standard, a clinical trial, where you randomly put people into two different parts and see whether mammography is effective. But the problem with that is that most of our data on that is very old. And the new data that we've got, which is on 14% of the US population, a really large sample size, shows that mammography is very effective at improving survival.
Can you see any downsides to mammography? I mean, is there a possibility of too much of a good thing? Because almost every doctor and every message out there says get mammograms. Is there any downside to overdoing it?
Well, the new dosage for mammograms is very low. It's very controlled. The usual recommendation is once per year if you're 40 years or older, and at that, it shouldn't be a problem.
Any other particular problems, such as too many biopsies? How do we control that?
The issue with the biopsies is that if you use a core biopsy rather than the open biopsy, it minimizes the trauma. You don't even have to go under for it.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
Oh, yes.
Core.
Okay.
Open, core open.
Thank you. Okay. The old standard used to be that you'd have to put a person under with anesthetic and actually open them up to see whether an abnormality was really cancer or not. That's not necessary anymore. A person can go into a situation where they're fully awake. They can take a large needle and they put it into the area that is suspicious. They can take out enough of the material to determine whether it is cancer or not. And so it reduces, yes, and it really reduces all the side effects and the trauma for having to go through an anesthetic.
Now, Dr. Chapman, you suggest that women, it's 50 and over now, but you would like to see a bit younger.
American Cancer Society recommends that 40 and over every year. So that's the other part of what Dr. McDougall's been saying. There are some people, very respectable people, and it's based on large population data. And
what about self-exam? We've heard so much about that, and we always read about it in all the magazines. Everyone's always telling us to learn.
Yes, it's still a part of the recommended package, but the problem is that it's not very accurate. By the time you can palpate and feel it, you have a much larger tumor than you can detect with mammography. Now, there's still age groups where that is the method of choice. If you are under 40, and if you are a familial case, you definitely should be thinking about using it.
Would this be a fair statement that when there's something of great controversy, then the benefits have to be marginal and the side effects have to be substantial, or people wouldn't be arguing about it?
I think that the argument in this case is based on two different sources of information, so, each of them quite valid in their own.
Why can't everybody get up to speed about this? Because women are, they don't know what to do when they hear different points of view.
It is, and I think the part of the message that has not got out yet, which is really quite exciting, is that the increase we kept hearing about, increased lifetime risk, was really from finding those small tumors, which have a 97% relative survival, and that good news has not got out to the general public. I'm glad for the opportunity to
aren't you going to ask about relative survival? I mean, this is important.
John, you're leading you right into it.
Okay.
Yes.
For any age group, a person is likely to die of something. So the issue is, if you can minimize the effect of breast cancer, making it essentially the same as not having it as far as your death rates, which is what it's relative to your survival from other causes of death. And it's essentially the same. If you get it really tiny, It's almost no
Early
effect.
detection is
Early
we always
detection
hear
is
that.
fantastic. Yes.
Well, and now I know that this is brand new, so we don't actually have a lot of the data about it, but they're combining having a mammogram with ultrasound, and there's a 70% increase in detecting. So that's kind of exciting research, and we'll hopefully hear more about that soon.
We'll hear, there's no question that these techniques do find breast cancer. Nobody questions that. What the question is whether or not finding it results in that much of a benefit. That's the argument, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's also a concern that we're finding cancers that really aren't cancer, like carcinoma in situ. That's gone up tremendously, hasn't it?
That is basically the good side. What you'd like to do is catch it before it becomes invasive cancer. And this is actually the good side that's happened, is that not only do we get the tumors smaller when they're invasive, we can actually get them before they become invasive. And we just now have to decide on how we're going to treat that situation. So, yeah.
But as I understand the controversy, it's an awful lot of these carcinoma in situs or precancerous lesions would never result in actual cancer, yet all of them are treated as if they are. They're treated very aggressively.
Well, this is a part of, we don't know that yet.
This is part of our discussion, and that brings us up to what is coming next, who is Dr. Charles Wright. He's a physician who challenges the conventional view of mammography and screening programs. So stay tuned.
Looking for a brighter future? Learn English and make it happen on Hello Channel.
We're back with Dr. Charles Wright, co-author of an important critique of mammography screening programs. Welcome, Dr. Wright.
Thank you.
Dr. Wright is a medical doctor, epidemiologist, and I think my bias will kind of show, Mary. I've listened to Dr. Wright for many years, and he has a point of view that I think is really important to share with women, because generally what they hear is just how wonderful mammography is without any question.
Well, I think, John, I mean, for me, I want it to work, and I want to know and to have early detection and all of the things that frighten us so much. So I think that everybody wants something to work.
Everybody does, exactly.
Yeah.
So what's the harm? I mean, after all, you're just doing mammography. How could you hurt anybody by doing it, even if it doesn't work?
Nobody's debating that it finds cancers, as you mentioned earlier. The question is, does it ultimately save lives? And in the process of doing that, you have to know how many lives, because there is a huge downside and of course financial cost as well, but there's a downside in terms of the very large number of false positives. Approximately 5 to 10% of all mammograms are called, quote, abnormal, unquote, and as soon as that happens, any woman watching this knows exactly what happens. You go into an anxiety state for one thing, and then you have to go through all the investigations ultimately to find a definite diagnosis. Either this is cancer or it's not cancer. In the vast majority of cases, the abnormal mammograms are not cancer, but you've been put through all this, which often takes a long time actually, may take several weeks and even months sometimes to get to a final diagnosis with ultrasounds, biopsies, core biopsies, and even open biopsy is still necessary in some cases. I'm a surgeon, and people who are not surgeons often don't realize that it's even more difficult to find a suspicious thing on a mammogram than it is to find a lump, which is palpable, because you don't know exactly where it is. And you have to be guided to it by the radiologist and by special techniques. And it often leads to a bigger operation than is even necessary for a lump.
Well, how about those women I mentioned earlier that really don't have cancer? They have a precancerous lesion, yet they're diagnosed, they're given the mastectomy, they're labeled with the diagnosis of cancer victim, no health insurance, no life insurance, worry the rest of their lives, and yet most of those women were never destined to die of breast cancer because this was just a precancerous lesion. And mammography has increased the number of these precancerous lesions being found from what, about 7% up to around 30% of the diagnoses?
Yes, indeed. We're into a huge industry with mammography in diagnosing and treating non-disease. We're finding all these, the technical term doesn't matter. We do not know whether they will become cancers or not, but they are found on mammography, and inevitably all the investigations are then triggered and they occur. We know that some of them will become cancers, but we do not know how many. And yet we are calling them cancers, and all the trials and all the programs.
You're treating them as if they are until you, and sometimes you're saying it can take weeks or months to find out. But if I'm a woman and I go in and there's something suspicious, don't I want to do everything that's possible, even if it might be scary or it might be painful, to find out that I don't have cancer?
Well, that is exactly the feeling among women which has captured the imagination about mammography. There's no question. It's this thought that the tremendous fear of cancer, which means, if I even have one chance in 1,000 that I want to know. But when you actually take a step back and look at what benefit are you likely to derive from this in exchange for what harm, not to mention the huge cost to any publicly funded healthcare system, for example, then you have to wonder. There is a benefit, but it is very small, and it's in exchange for a very large cost.
But there's a lot of controversy out there. And this is the thing that has to bother doctors, I'm sure, because they see the literature and they read it like I do and see there's so much controversy. But when our listening audience, our viewing audience, when they see that doctors, respected doctors like you and Dr. Chapman, disagree on this, they get confused and they want to know why, if it's so darn good, is anybody arguing about it?
I think it comes from this desperate feeling that we do not have many weapons at the moment. And there is a pervasive attitude that the earlier you find cancer, the better it is. There is not a whole lot of evidence for that in many cancers, but there is for some, and it's captured again the public imagination. So as we've said, mammography does find them early, so people automatically feel that that will benefit them. But what may not be well realized is that the clinical trials on which one must base the data. I mean, I'm sorry, I do not accept the kind of data of which Dr. Chapman spoke. The clinical trials are the only way you can answer this question. In younger women under the age of 50, they are completely inconclusive. Some show that you're less likely to die of breast cancer. Some show you're more likely to die of breast cancer. Overall, there is very little effect, and if there is any effect, it's probably in the region of 10 to 15%, which for women in the 5th decade of life translates into approximately 3 or 4 women per 10,000 being benefited in exchange for this huge amount of breast surgery and breast intervention that's generated.
That's not very many. Then what do we do? What do you suggest?
I would suggest that we emphasize and particularly look at ways to generate the research which will get at the problem. Mm-hmm. We would love to find breast cancer early, but early doesn't mean half a centimeter size instead of 1 centimeter, which is where a mammogram helps. Early means 5 years before or 7 years before, when the cancer began to develop, because that is the problem.
So you're saying the cancer is 5 to 7 years old and maybe older?
And maybe
when
older.
When you find it on mammograms?
Exactly. It's usually something between 5 and 10 years it's been there before it's diagnosed. If it's diagnosed clinically with a lump, it may be 1 year later than you can diagnose it with a mammogram, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference in the natural history of the disease, which is why the trials show that mammography has so little effect.
So in the long run, in the long term of the people who actually
But
are
it's a
helped
10-year-old
and are
disease,
dying.
Mary, by the time you find it, and by that time, if it's truly cancer, it's spread.
In many cases.
In
some cases it doesn't, but it seems to be more under control of the body and its immune system and lots of things that we don't understand, rather than the treatment that's imposed. The treatment helps, but the ultimate result as to whether a woman lives to a ripe old age and dies of old age or succumbs to the breast cancer seems to be more something inside the patient.
Well, that is certainly scary for me, being a woman sitting here. And I know you probably have a lot of questions, and we have more questions for both Dr. Wright and Dr. Judy Ann Chapman. So please stay with us, and we'll be right back after this.
All I really needed to hear that day was what my dad told me. He said, "You're never a winner if you lose your temper."
Life's most important lessons are best learned with family. A message from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Hello.
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 And welcome back. We have with us Dr. Judy Ann Chapman and also Dr. Charles Wright. And we have a lively debate about to begin on breast cancer. You know, Dr. Chapman, I would have to say almost every physician and almost every woman in this country believes in your position that it's a well worthwhile test. Can you give us some absolute numbers or some idea? I mean, you want to know how much is going to benefit you.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean now that it's been raised.
Right. I think the thing is I have to back up a little bit with respect to saying what my numbers are based on. And the clinical trials data is based on the baby boomers' mums when they were 40 to 49 largely. And that group tended to have more children, have them young, and there are a lot fewer people who didn't have any, which means they were low risk for breast cancer. And our current group of 40 to 49s tend to have postpone their first pregnancy, have fewer, and there are a lot of women who are choosing not to have any children, which puts them at a higher risk. And I return to the data then.
So you think if we take a group of women that have a higher risk,
Yes.
you're going to see the benefits better, whereas we didn't see them before because we had women at a lower risk.
That's right.
Well, Mary, you're the baby boomer at a higher risk.
Here I am. I only have one child,
Yes.
so here I am. And
So what are we talking about in terms of the actual benefits you see for her?
Okay, and from the data that I was giving the underlying basis for, if you got into the 14% of the U.S. population that was studied, you got to work up like you were on a clinical trial, and if you catch that tumor early, your survival is 97% that of your regular mortality. So you are essentially as good as not having breast cancer.
if I have
That's a pretty strong statement. Dr. Wright, do you?
I find it truly bizarre to say I will not pay any attention to the results of the clinical trials, which are the only really meaningful studies, because they do not agree with my wish for mammography to be helpful. When you look at all the clinical trials, and they have been well documented, in that decade you have approximately 25 women die of cancer in a group of 10,000. I mean, these are facts. Mm-hmm. A 15% relative reduction in mortality, which is the best that has been claimed yet from the meta-analysis, that means the sort of reviews of all the studies. A 15% reduction in mortality means that 3 to 4 women out of 25, that's 15%, will be saved. So 3 per 10,000 women in exchange for thousands and thousands of mammograms, follow-ups, biopsies, anxiety, and a huge cost, which is in the region of about $5 million.
Yeah, but Dr. Chapman has such a point of view that women would like to believe in, that they're going to be saved. I mean, what's the problem with believing that she's right?
Well, this gets into a value judgment, and I'm probably going to have to say that cost effectiveness is not an absolute science. It's a question of what do you value. And if society considers that this tiny benefit in exchange for this huge downside, harm, and cost is valuable, then
Yeah, but
then fine.
a woman,
That's
one
me.
woman, if it saves her life, it's worthwhile.
I think the
how
thing
can
is,
we judge that?
So
Say,
that's
well,
the
only
latest.
4 women out
right.
of 10,000 and a lot
No,
of money.
that's,
Well, who
that's,
cares?
that's based on, again, old methodology. I think we can turn this disease around if we go for the fact that everyone goes regularly, we fully utilize the machines, there's no cost leftovers that way. You don't have to
But
spend...
Dr. Wright is saying that the machines is not worth it.
well, no, but that's
that I
based
won't
on,
live anyway. So.
Well, no, that's not true. You see, you get them in early, and the latest Swedish clinical trial shows that you can catch it before it spreads outside of the breast, and then you have a very, very good chance of living.
And that's the 90%, 7%.
Yeah, very, very good. You may not have to have chemotherapy, and we just turn this whole psychological thing around. So you get it early. It isn't traumatic anymore. You know, you're just going to have your checkups, and only a few people will have any further consequences, and everyone...
You know, I want to believe her. I want to believe her.
Well, me too, because now I don't know what to do.
It would be lovely if this were true.
Okay.
Well,
unfortunately, we're selling the public a bill of goods.
I don't have any commercial stock.
It's both based on, what's confusing me is both based on separate studies, though.
Separate
there's
cohorts of women. separate cohorts of women, different decades of
Well, no,
experience.
you have to look at the same data that Dr. Wright looks at. You're looking at the same studies.
Well, I do, and then I say what the reason for switching is if the clinical trial is not answering the right question on the right group of women, I have to say, what's next? And when you have 14% of the U.S. population doing a great job.
I mean, you mean if the clinical trial's not giving you the answer you want
That's
to see,
right.
which we all want to see.
Oh, no,
I agree,
no.
but one looks at the evidence as it is available
You could-
before committing huge resources to something, if there's a doubt.
You can get the costs down by switching away from the expensive film screening to the digital computer screen.
But can we get the lives up?
Yes, absolutely.
You
Get it
believe that?
small? Absolutely. We've got the data. It's a large population.
You keep saying small. Dr. Wright said small was a 5 to 7-year-old disease.
That is...
Is that true?
Well, we don't know that yet because you cannot follow a lady being able to detect her. I'm a statistician and I'd love to be able to do that analysis. I'm trying to find ways to do it.
Yeah.
But we have not been able to do that, to push it back beyond the DCIS that you mentioned, the non-invasive. That's as far as we can push it back so far. So I don't know.
But everything we do know about the growth of cells and cancers tells us that, again, that it has been for this length of time in the body before it becomes big enough to be found anyway.
Do you, either one of you, see an opportunity that we can end this argument by better technology?
Absolutely. There are new methods coming along that are very, very sensitive. The 3D screening option, a mammogram, you do it one way and then you do it the other way, and you're still talking 2D, and it's not as good as we'd like. If you move to 3D, it's very exciting. I think you can get some much better results.
Dr. Wright?
Absolutely not, because the best technology in the world may be able to push that diagnostic point back another year, which
So it's
still
a 5, 6-year-old disease.
only research into the basic fundamentals of what makes a cancer develop in the first place is going to help this disease.
Well, thank you both very much. This is a very heated topic, as you know, and we're going to commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Ruth. Learning to speak English can change your life. Knowing this valuable language can provide you with so many opportunities in education as well as the job market. Now you can learn English just by watching television. Introducing Hello Channel, a channel designed to help you learn English right in your own home. You can choose from Hello Channel's classroom programming, or you can watch great entertainment. All of it will teach you how to speak English. Hello Channel offers programs on every level, so you'll find something exactly right for you. Start today to build success by learning English. For a brighter future, say hello.
I like work hard, but then I play hard. So I work out hard and then I don't do anything for like 3 months at a time.
And welcome back with Dr. Wright and Dr. Chapman. Mary, I have a solution. You
Yes.
know, we're talking about big money. We're talking about $5 billion to do one mammogram on each woman over the age of 50 in the United States. $5 billion. Let's take that $5 billion and spend it on preventing breast cancer with a good diet.
Of
Now,
course.
would you have any objection to that?
I think I would. I might give you some of it, but I'd like a lot of it to go to breast cancer research.
We also have to treat, unfortunately, the patients that do get the breast cancer, and that's where we want to minimize it. Keep it as small as possible so it's as cheap as possible to treat, and they live longer.
Yes. Well, just so you know, during the break, I went to the audience and we asked them if they were confused, like I am, and they all said yes. And most of the audience would have a mammogram before they walked into this building, and now they're questioning, which I think is really important, and it's the purpose of why you're here, and we thank you, because putting it all out on the table and letting everyone make their own
You need to
decisions.
ask questions, and ask your doctor about this material, and ask your doctors to substantiate any test or any treatment that your doctor recommends. I mean, you're the customer, so get the information.
Thank you so much for being here.
It was a real pleasure to
This
have
is
you.
amazing.
Great guests. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.